1, 2. One, 2, 3, 4. One, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This is sound check. 1, 2.
I've been reading all your signs, but I'd rather play a losing game. I promise, baby, I'll be crazy. Yeah, the high is worth the pain. So before I break, baby, fill me up, baby, fill me up. When I disappear, you won't even hear how my heart is stuck. So baby, tear me up in pieces. I don't need a reason, I don't need a reason. Because you move me, baby, don't you prove me wrong this time, wrong this time, wrong this time. Because you move me, baby, don't you prove me wrong this time, wrong this time, wrong this time.
Ladies and gentlemen, could you please take your seats?
Because you
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Thumbs up if you're happy. Good stuff, guys. 1, 2.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's fantastic to see so many friendly faces here today. Conservative gain. That was me in the early hours on July the 5th when I was lucky enough to win in my home constituency of Leicester East. But let's be honest, I shouldn't have been the only one celebrating. We should have been toasting Conservative gains and holds across the country. Instead, we let internal squabbles and distractions overshadow the incredible things that successive Conservative governments have achieved for our country. The good news is we can rebuild, and I've got bags of optimism for us as a party if we can get our act together. And here's the best part. I believe we've got just the person to lead us to that victory. James. I saw him in Leicester over the weekend, getting out there, meeting with businesses, engaging with the community, and genuinely connecting with people. James has shown us that he's not just a talker, he's a doer. No fuss, no drama, just getting the job done. James is the leader who can help us tell the positive story of conservatism again. He, like me, believes that our country's best days are ahead of us if we stay true to the conservative values of opportunity, freedom, and aspiration. We can absolutely be the party of the future, but it starts with making the right choice now. As the youngest Conservative MP and our future gain, I want to win over young voters, give them real reasons to vote Conservative. Let's make sure they have the opportunities that they deserve, no matter who they are or where they come from. Let's help them get the best education, own a home, and the confidence to start their own business. We all know the country is facing some big challenges, but I am convinced that conservative ideas are the answers that we need, and we've got to make that case to the electorate. If we do, then come next election, we'll be waking up to conservative gains across the country. It's not just about the next 5 years. This is about inspiring a whole generation of people. And James is the leader who can get us there. I'm absolutely thrilled to be on his team. And now, I have the greatest honor to introduce another country-first patriot on Team Cleverly, someone who I hope will be another conservative gain when the opportunity knocks. He's done so much for our party and our country, and I know he's got plenty more to give. So please join me in giving a big warm welcome to Grant Shapps.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. You know, I was first elected in 2005 when Tony Blair won a third consecutive victory. And I've seen us fight back from obscurity of opposition, right to Downing Street. So I know what it takes. I know the qualities required of the leader that will bring us back to power and back to life. We've got to have somebody who's really clear-minded, someone with a vision of what Britain should look like and could look like under the Conservatives, and someone who is capable of selling that vision, not through pessimism, but through the optimism of what this country can become. Not through platitudes and sound bites, but through actual delivery. It's got to be someone truly able to lead a team. Now, I've had the privilege of occupying quite a high number of roles in the cabinet. In fact, you'd have to go back to Rab Butler in the 1960s to find a Conservative who's been in more positions around the cabinet table. But that has given me a rather unique perspective on my colleagues. You know, you get to see the different styles. You get to see how various different Secretary of States work. You get to study their approaches. You see what works and what, frankly, does not. And my friends, there is someone who knows how to set out a compelling vision around that cabinet table. It's someone who knows how to get the most out of his team when leading one. He's the person who has a track record of delivery, and that man is James Cleverly. You know, at the Foreign Office, he shifted our diplomatic focus away from years of chasing sluggish EU growth markets and redirected our attention towards the global opportunities that were available post-Brexit. James is quick to lead. He was the first foreign minister to visit Israel after those horrific Hamas attacks on the 7th of October. And when he and I worked together to rally international support for Ukraine. As ever, James didn't just talk, he acted and he delivered. And then at the Home Office, he delivered the measures which have now helped to cut net migration in half. He signed a treaty with Rwanda, and he steered the Safety of Rwanda bill through Parliament. Again, he didn't just talk, he acted. You see, James is a real doer. You know, he and I have both been chairman of this great party. But here's the difference. When I was chairman in 2015, I delivered a slender Conservative majority of 12 seats. But when James did the same job in 2019, he delivered a thumping majority of 80 seats for this party. Now, James has a saying. He's got many, but this one I like. Prioritise the tasks that matter the most and tackle them in the right order. And he knows the first responsibility of any government is the defence of the realm. So here today, in the Old War Office, James is committing our party to increase our defence spending to 3% of GDP, ensuring we are better prepared for the challenges ahead. James knows what we need to do to control our borders. He already has that strong track record of decreasing migration, which means that you can be confident when he says he'll deliver. He knows we need to unshackle our economy, and he'll do just that. His brand of conservatism, of a state that does less but better, that relies on individuals, the private sector and families to play their role instead of being crowded out by the government, of lower taxes, less regulation, more freedom and safety. This is the vision that our country needs. So, my friends, colleagues, we know how much defeat hurts. I felt it on the 4th of July. We all felt it, didn't we? But we can't waste any time now. We can't spend time wallowing in self-pity or get involved in prolonged introspection while Starmer's wannabe socialists drag our country down. We need to pick the right leader this autumn, and that leader is James, because here are 3 incontrovertible facts about James. He is the most experienced leader in this race. He is the best communicator, and he's a first-class campaigner with a fantastic vision for this country. So, ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming the man we need to make the next leader of the Conservative Party and the next Prime Minister of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, James Cleverly.
Politician who talks, he's a politician who delivers.
He puts his all into everything that he does. If he decides he wants to do something, he will do it. He will go out there and he will get it done.
Well, I've seen James in a couple of different roles around the cabinet table, and the interesting thing is, when he speaks, the cabinet would listen. And that's because he's got the experience, if you like, the depth to be able to do that job.
He's a real people person. He always has been. And with James, what you see is what you get.
Our next leader needs to be able to unify the party, and James has embodied unity. He's one of the longest serving continuous ministers. He served under Boris, he served under Liz, he served under Rishi. He was campaigning for us right up until the close at the general election.
James has always been on the voluntary party's side. While others were stabbing each other in the back, briefing in the press and taking out leaders, making volunteers' life more difficult, James was getting on with the job and standing by the voluntary party. James has always been on our side, as Home Secretary, Foreign Secretary and Party Chairman, because James knows that supporting the voluntary party and campaigning is for life, not just for leadership elections.
We need to win back seats, seats like mine in the southwest against the Liberal Democrats. We need to win back seats against Labour and against Reform as well. But first and foremost, we need to unite, and then we can win. And that's what James will help us do.
In the chair of the Leader of the Opposition,
and then ultimately in the chair of the Prime Minister, he would do a fantastic job. He is, in fact, a natural leader in that regard.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Hey! Oh, come on, thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, Shivani, for what you said. I'm incredibly grateful for the support that you and others from the 2024 intake have given me, and I'm very proud of your support. And Grant, thank you so very, very much. Your experience is really missed around the cabinet table, and I'm incredibly grateful for you to be part of Team Cleverly. And we must make sure that we get the experience that we lost at the last general election, and the new MPs elected for the first time, and those fantastic candidates who were not elected this year. We must get them on the government benches once again after the next general election. And to do that, we need voters to see that the Conservative Party is focused on them and not just focused on ourselves. The parliamentary party needs to lead by example. We must be unified. We must be disciplined. And unity is not the easy option. It is the harder option. But we can choose to unite, or we can choose to stay in opposition. Because people don't vote for divided parties. They don't trust divided parties. They don't even listen to divided parties. So we must unite if we want the British people to listen to us again. So when they are fed up, as they inevitably will be, with Starmer's inept, high taxing, red tape loving, big state, crony-filled government, they will look to us again to be the change that they want to see in this country. Now, I've spoken on behalf of the government for 6 years. Now I plan to take us back into government. I've been a team player under 4 different prime ministers, but now I plan to lead the team. And I've defended other people's decisions and policies, but now I plan to make those policies. And today, I will set out my vision for this great country, and I'll show why I am uniquely suited to unite the party, to win at the next general election, and to deliver for the British people once again. We need to recognise that it's not enough for a Conservative leader just to believe in Conservative values. It's not enough just to state those Conservative values. We need to sell Conservative values to the country once again. Because our party is at its best when it provides clear and a positive vision for voters, when we provide the right solutions for the challenges that our country and our world face. Let's look back through the history of our great party. Robert Peel saw inequality. He saw the inequality between those with the wealth to buy staff to protect them and the poor who could not. So he created the Metropolitan Police to protect the poor. Disraeli saw injustice He saw the injustice of children doing dangerous work, drinking disease-ridden water. So he brought in the Factory Act and the Public Health Act. Churchill saw fascism and stood up to it. Thatcher saw economic defeatism and reversed it. That decisiveness is what we need to show now, and I will. Of course, the challenges of today are different to the challenges of the past. But we must have the courage of our conservative forebears to tackle the great problems of our time. And let me set out what I believe are the three great challenges that we face, that we must, and that I will, with your support, tackle head on. The first of these challenges is our deeply unstable world. Now, the warning lights were flashing red well before Putin's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. And the sad fact is that there are few reasons to believe that the world is going to be any safer or more secure anytime soon. Authoritarian regimes are increasingly trying to undermine our way of life. The freedoms that we cherish and the international rules that have kept us safe are under threat. And I have seen the threats that our country faces. I have been in charge of MI6, of MI5, of GCHQ. I've been to Ukraine. I've been to Taiwan, to the Baltic, to the Caucasus. I've looked at Russian soldiers occupying land that isn't theirs. I was the first foreign minister to visit Israel after the 7th of October atrocities. Now, when Grant was Secretary of State for Defence, he set out a timetable to spend 2.5% of GDP on defence by 2030. But Starmer, in an act of vandalism, has scrapped that pledge. Now, I supported Grant when he made the bold decision then, but I will go further. And as he said, I will commit, as Prime Minister, to spend 3% of GDP on defence. Because you cannot penny pinch your way to peace. Security is delivered through strength, by planning for the worst, not hoping for the best. And we will send a signal to our enemies and our allies alike that the UK is prepared, that we will not leave the field. And just to put that commitment in perspective, we currently spend less than 2.5% of our GDP on defence, but 10 times that much on our health system, welfare system, and on pensions. Starmer says that we cannot afford to spend more on defence. I say we cannot afford not to. The second major challenge that faces us is global migration. And we must restore our credibility on this issue to win back the voters that switched to Reform and switched to the Lib Dems and Labour and those that stayed at home. As Home Secretary, I delivered the reforms that are currently cutting net migration by half. I didn't talk tough, I took action. I negotiated with the Chancellor, with the Health Secretary, with the Education Secretary, to achieve the changes in our visa regime which are currently bringing those numbers down. And we have to be more honest in our conversation about the trade-offs with regard to immigration. And that means changing how we measure our wealth. It means using GDP per capita as the metric for our economy so that the Treasury cannot mask low growth with high migration. Rising GDP overall is meaningless if the wealth per person is falling. So we need to control legal migration. And when I was Home Secretary, I did. Under my leadership, Home Office applications fell. The backlog was cleared. the grant rate came down, deportations increased. I didn't talk tough, I took action. And when we deal with illegal migration, I stand by what I have always said. We need to have a deterrent. And as leader, as Prime Minister, I will use my contacts and my reputation with Rwanda to resurrect that incredibly important partnership. And more than that, I will rebuild a relationship so badly damaged by Labour's arrogant and callous disregard to the diplomatic niceties that bind the world. To inform the media that they were scrapping this partnership before they had the courage to inform the Rwandan government is unacceptable, and that would never have happened under my leadership. We need to recognise there are currently around 280 million people on the move globally. And so we must, of course, address why people move. We have influence on the international stage, and we must use it. At the UN, at the G20, at the G7, at the World Bank, we must, of course, tackle the drivers of mass movement: war, famine, persecution, economic failure, because in this portfolio, as in so many others, prevention is better than cure. And to those people who we do welcome into our country, we must make it clear. Our welcome comes with modest but non-negotiable conditions. Tolerance isn't something that you demand of others, it is something that you are duty-bound to give. Our laws cannot be trumped by cultural sensitivities. Play by the rules, work hard, and you can expect our thanks and support. Break the rules, abuse our hospitality, and you can expect us to take action. The third major challenge that we must address is a crisis in the confidence in capitalism. We handed Labour a growing economy, the fastest economy growth in the G7. But compared to historic levels, and indeed compared to African or Asian economic growth rates, we are not doing anywhere near well enough. We need to unlock real growth again, and we need to show young people that free markets, not planned economies, are their friend. We need to turn them into capitalists, because too many people think that high taxes help them rather than hold them down. They think that more regulation protects them rather than benefiting incumbent suppliers. Protectionism drives up costs for them, drives down choice for them, benefits the already rich and harms the aspirational poor. And I will make boosting our economic growth a defining mission of our party. And I will make sure selling the benefits of free markets to a new generation is a key part of that. Because growth does not come from more quangos and nationalising services. It comes from less red tape, lower taxes, and a dynamic leadership. And we know this is true because we have evidence. Look at Docklands under Heseltine and Margaret Thatcher, the Olympic Park under Boris, and Tees Works under Ben Houchin. What I saw on the Tees Valley was incredible, stimulating an estimated 20,000 new jobs, attracting an annual £1 billion investment into the regional and local economy. And these low tax, low regulation zones is what I want to see more of around the whole country. We used to have a one-in, one-out rule for regulation. But the truth is, we strayed from the path of righteousness. So we've got to get back on track, maybe even go further, having a one-in, two-out approach to regulation. because we must empower the innovators and the wealth creators, because this son of an entrepreneur will make us the party of business once again. So we need to do more to empower the private sector, not the state, to drive our economy. Ben Houchin has done exactly that in Teesside. This is the conservative economic model. And Churchill, as in so many things, was absolutely right when he said, a nation taxing its way to prosperity is like a man standing in a bucket and trying to lift himself up by the handle. People will vote for Starmer's statism if they don't feel that capitalism is working for them. And for many people, especially the young, it isn't working for them. Home ownership has been a cornerstone of the Conservative Party offer since the war. And just as Margaret Thatcher enabled council tenants to buy their homes in the 1980s, we need to give young people a stake in our society and in our growing economy. That is the Conservative, that is the capitalist approach. And it was right that we cut stamp duty for first-time buyers, but we should go further. It should be our mission to abolish stamp duty on homes altogether. It's a bad tax. It's a bad tax. It stifles transactions in an already illiquid housing market. It deters people from downsizing. And like all taxes, it ultimately increases the cost to buyers. And of course, we need to build lots more homes, and we will. But we should be building upwards in our cities rather than outwards. If our Georgian forebears could see the beauty in 3- and 4-story houses, then why on earth can't we? So adding an extra story to a building should enjoy a presumption of planning consent, because it would support small local businesses, would pump money into the local economy, and it would be more environmentally and aesthetically sustainable. Now, we must provide conservative answers to the problems that people face. An unstable world, global migration, and a crisis in confidence in capitalism. And we must get our act together as a party to provide the conservative solutions to these problems. The solutions of the left don't, won't, and will never work. And when they try to impose them, they harm the very people they are meant to help. So we have to do things differently. And that means being honest and realistic about the role of the state and what it can and should do and what it should not and cannot do. The state should focus on doing a few things well, not everything badly. Now, of course, only the state can provide police forces and armed forces, and both need to be effective and well funded. And we must, and of course we will, support the people who fall on hard times or suffer from ill health. But our welfare budget has spiralled out of control, and we must bring it down, and I will bring it down. And we must also be honest about the trade-offs. We cannot nationalise all risks or eradicate all difficulties. The state should not always be the first port of call when problems arise. We should enable self-reliance, family-first resilience, and community solutions. Tax and subsidise cannot be our mantra anymore. So we must think and act like Conservatives once again. Demonstrate that we understand the challenges that people in our country face now and provide the solutions to give them a brighter and better future. And we accomplished lots in government, but our divisions and our behaviour obscured our victories and amplified our mistakes. We spent too much time talking tough and not enough time taking action. We spoke lots about what we were going to do, but almost never about why we were going to do it. This is the opposite of how I have acted in my career, and it is the opposite of how I intend to lead. I will tackle the problems in front of us with conservative solutions, and I will make the UK the greatest power in Europe, strong in defence of our people, our allies and our interests, strong in defence of our values and our principles, strong on the international stage and secure and prosperous at home. I don't accept the shared declinism of Starmer and Farage, who both believe that our best days are behind us. Starmer thinks it was better before we left the EU. Farage thinks it was better before we joined the EU. They're both wrong. I know that our best years can be ahead of us, but only if we replace this useless Labour government. And in order to win again, we need a leader who can unite the party, and I'm the best place to do that. Because I'm the best place to do that because to command loyalty, you have to have displayed loyalty. And I have always served the leader of the day, never briefed against colleagues, and focused relentlessly on delivering for the British people. And in order to win again, we need to unite around conservative principles. And I'm the best place to do that, because I've never chopped and changed my political position or philosophy. I have actually reformed public services. I've actually cut spending. I've driven better performance. When I led the London Fire Authority, when I led at the Foreign Commonwealth and Development Office, when I led at the Home Office, and as Grant said, when I led as chairman of the party, helping to deliver a record majority at the 2019 general election. And in order to win again, we need a leader who can communicate with Conservative voters. Those voters that we kept, those voters that we lost, and those who will be voting for us perhaps for the first time ever at the next general election. And I know that I'm the best placed to do that. I'm the most experienced and effective communicator that the party has got. And you cannot communicate your policies or our values if you hide from the media. So I know that I can unite the Conservative Party with sound conservative principles, delivered in a positive, optimistic and energetic way to show that we can get us back to where we need to be. I know that I'm the best placed to lead our party as leader of the opposition and then our country as Prime Minister. And I know that I can lead us to that better future. And the time is now. There is no time to lose. So let's get to work. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. So I'm happy to take some questions from the media. Why don't we start off with Helen, BBC? I'll come to you in a second, Beth, I promise. Helen, BBC.
Hello, Helen Camp, BBC. You've talked a lot about your experience, about having been the recognisable face of government for many years now. How will you then sell yourself and your party to a public that have just emphatically voted for change?
Well, all the candidates running for the leadership have been ministers in the government, so we all bring experience. As I've said, I'm uniquely well placed because I have demonstrably more experience in running and delivering public services, in cutting expenditure, in lowering the cost of government. So I have always been delivery, delivery, delivery. And I also recognise in opposition, communicating is absolutely key. And as I said, I have done more communicating on behalf of our Conservative values than I think anybody else, not just the leadership candidates, but anyone else at all of the current political era. So I know that I can take our message to former Conservative voters and Conservative voters of the future, which is why I'm putting myself forward, which is why I believe I'm best placed to win. Beth.
Thanks very much, Beth Rugby, Sky News. Reflecting on the Conservatives' worst ever defeat over this summer, what is your diagnosis of what went so wrong? And to follow up on what Helen said, as a former Home Secretary, Foreign Secretary, Education Secretary and Party Chairman, for many voters, you are the very embodiment of what they have just rejected. Does that make you part of the problem, not the solution? Thank you.
Well, Beth, as I say, everyone running has been a minister in the Conservative government, and we will all have to stand by our record. My record has been delivery, 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 delivery. When I was at the Home Office, I perhaps broke with tradition and spent less time shouting about what frustrated me and more time dealing with what frustrated the British people. So I put changes in place that we are now seeing is bringing down net migration. I made sure we were sending people who had no right to be here back to their country of origin. Deportations went up. I made sure we tightened the criteria for accepting asylum applications, so the application rate came down. I made sure that we coordinated with international law enforcement to disrupt the supply chains of boats, of engines, of illegal money. And I sent people smugglers to prison for a combined sum of hundreds of years. And I could go back, including the time as party chairman, where I helped some fantastic candidates around the country, and of course Boris Johnson as Prime Minister, to deliver the best election result that we had seen in decades. So if we're going to be judged on our records, I am very, very happy to be judged on my record of delivery. And when you say, what is my analysis is not what counts. What counts is what I was told on doorsteps in Braintree and across the country when I was campaigning both for myself and my friends and colleagues. Over and over and over again, I had people on the doorsteps who said, I have always voted Conservative, but. And anyone that knocked on doors in this general election will recognise what would come next. They would say, but this infighting is killing you, and I'm not going to vote for you until you get your act together, until you start actually acting as if you care about me rather than care about yourselves. I am not going to vote for you. So let's do what they told us to do, which is stop messing about, get our act together, start serving the British people and getting back into government at the first opportunity. Carl, if I could go to you next. There we go.
Thanks very much, James. Just looking at the board behind you there, isn't promising lower taxes but higher spending the sort of thing that has just got the Tory party an electoral drubbing?
So this is very much about priorities. And Grant has said, he's worked with me very, very closely. Foreign Secretary and Defence Secretary are two roles that have to be entwined like the strands in a rope. And Grant and I absolutely were, which is one of the reasons why I'm pleased but not surprised that he's backing me, because I know how he works, he knows how I work. And the way you work, the way you deliver, as I have done through my career, is to prioritise, prioritise, prioritise. So, in an increasingly turbulent world, we need to send a message to ourselves, our allies and our opponents that we take our international responsibilities and our domestic responsibilities seriously, which is why we have to spend 3% on defence. And I've said that requires trade-offs. That does require trade-offs. You cannot credibly cut taxes unless you have a credible plan to progressively, fairly, but nevertheless relentlessly push down on public spending. And I've committed to do that, and I will set out how, in a fair and transparent way, between now and when we stand for election in a few years' time at national level, to show people that you can run better government, smaller government. And the point is, it is in their interest to do so. So when the Labour Party say that the tax rate is too high and then immediately set about doing a whole load of things that are going to push taxes up, the British people will very quickly get fed up with that hypocrisy and that dishonesty, and that will never happen under my leadership. Catherine from GB News.
Catherine Forster, GB News, thank you. You talked about young people. We know now that people aren't likely to vote for the Conservatives till they're well in their 50s, more likely to vote till they're well in their 50s. You've mentioned stamp duty, but how are you going to get the under 50s back looking at the Conservatives? Because a cut in stamp duty, I mean, many people would say that's just going to put prices up. It's going to be expensive. It's going to take more than that, isn't it?
So taking a big tax burden off a financial transaction will not push the price up, quite the opposite. And the point is that there are two things that we need to address when we talk to younger voters and we try to attract younger voters. One is policy, and I've given an indication of my desired direction of travel, easing regulation and red tape, reducing the cost of products and services so that young people particularly have got a credible chance to get on the housing ladder, making sure we build, and we do need to build, and we do need to build up where there are already transport links, where there's infrastructure, where there's employment, learning from our forebears who understood that 1- and 2-storey houses are not best use of land, and actually 3- and 4-storey houses, for example, can significantly increase the supply of housing and still do so in a beautiful and aesthetically pleasing way. So there's policy stuff, but the other thing we've got to get right is tone. Now, you will never upset a room full of Tories by saying that you were a big fan of Margaret Thatcher. I am a big fan of Margaret Thatcher, by the way. See? But perhaps more than that, my real political hero of that era was Ronald Reagan. And Ronald Reagan, particularly in his re-election campaign, took a staunchly conservative agenda, but delivered it in an optimistic, passionate, upbeat, energetic way. And we should learn from that. We've never been the nasty party, I've never subscribed to that, but we have turned into the grumpy party. And young people are turned off by that. So let's change that. Let's be optimistic. Let's focus on them, attract them to the party, listen to their voices, and deliver on their aspirations. And that's what I would do. Gary from Channel 4. There's the microphone.
Thank you very much. On a smaller state, is there one area of the welfare state that you think has been overly expanded, where you'd like to start a conversation about it? The Tories expanded childcare, or are you interested in NHS insurance, moving to an insurance model? Is there an example you can give us of something along those lines that contribute to a smaller state? And just one quick one, if I may. You backed Liz Truss in the last Tory contest, and when she'd gone, you backed Boris Johnson to come back. How do you now reflect on those judgment calls?
Well, firstly, I'd make that point about funding of the NHS. That was your idea, not one that I've put forward. But let me give you one example, and there are others, and we can find many. Let me give you one example of where we slipped into a tax and subsidised loop, which is completely inappropriate. You mentioned childcare. Take childcare as an example. So we have a desire to grow our economy and help parents, when I say parents, disproportionately, of course, is women, get back into work after they have their children. The cost of childcare is an inhibiting factor to women returning to the workplace. But why is it so very expensive? Because a whole bunch of civil servants that we take tax money to pay for have increased the regulation and complexity around the provision of childcare. You can get a subsidy if someone looks after your child, but only if the person looking after your child is a stranger, not a member of your family. So we pay for civil servants to complicate the childcare provision, which makes it more expensive. So then what we do is we subsidise that expense that we created to enable women to get back into the workplace. But we then have to tax those women, which is administered by civil servants, paid for by tax, in order to give them the subsidy by civil servants, paid for by tax, to pay for the increased cost that we created through excessive bureaucracy, paid for by civil servants. So why don't we just cut out... So why don't we cut out that expensive, bureaucratic tax and subsidy system in the middle? Just make it a lot easier for people to provide childcare, and make it a lot easier for people to support their own families through childcare, which is probably, I would argue, the most natural human instinct in the world. And we disincentivise it through an expensive and bureaucratic tax system. And you know what? I could do that same routine for a whole load of other issues, but frankly, I don't have time. Where we got to? Andy from Channel 5. Andy. And huge congratulations on George's medal. Well, huge congratulations.
Thank you very much. I don't know how long I can keep this going, but thank you. Appreciate your words. Just a quick question, Andy Bell, 5 News. Do you see Nigel Farage and Reform UK as the enemy, or as friends you just haven't got to know properly yet?
It's really easy to use the most aggressive language when you're in politics. If you're chasing clicks and likes on social media, that's the way forward. That's never really been my style. We have opponents in politics, and I try to ensure that I help get Conservatives elected at every opportunity, and I try and defeat political opponents. I don't describe people as enemies. And the simple fact of the matter is, we lost a lot of voters to Reform, but we also lost voters to other political parties, and we also lost a lot of voters to one of the most successful parties in contemporary politics, which is the stay-at-home, not-vote party. And we need to win them back from everywhere. And we don't do that by trying to do a passable impression of other political leaders. We do that by being Conservatives, by highlighting our Conservative values, as I've set out in this speech and as I will do as leader, by pursuing the things that people know to be our agenda. And the most important thing is to deliver on our promises. And in order to do that, we need to make fewer promises, but deliver on every single promise we make. And if we do that, we'll get voters back from Reform and the Lib Dems and Labour, and of course stay at home. And that is what I'm absolutely determined to do. Adam, can I come to you next?
It's actually Ollie Cole from Times
Ollie,
Radio.
hi.
We've heard a lot about how you're the best communicator, the best for delivery, the best for prioritisation.
Great answer. Sit down. Go on.
Maybe not the best at comebacks. What's your weak spot and how do you plan to fix it? And seeing as you're so good at priorities, I'm going to ask you to make a priority decision now. Would a tax rise be justified if it meant hitting 3% of defence spending?
So we don't need to raise taxes to hit 3% of defence spending. So I reject the premise of the question because that's always the left-wing argument, which is, oh, if you value this thing, I have to put your taxes up. And we are running out of road on that as a philosophy. The maths does not stack up. You can't just keep ramping up the proportion of people's wealth and the national's wealth or the nation's wealth through higher and higher and higher taxes. It just doesn't work. It doesn't work politically, it doesn't work economically, it doesn't work mathematically. So we have got to fundamentally change the way that we do things. And the broader point about my weaknesses, everybody has weaknesses. And recognising that building a team is how you offset your individual weaknesses, by not trying to do everything. And whilst I'm not going to describe it as a weakness, the leader of an organisation, whether it be a sports team, a business, a military unit or a political party, has got to maintain a wide overview. You have got to look at the horizon. You've got to plan what goes on beyond the horizon. You have to find a way of looking at the bigger picture. But in order to do that, you do need people that are making sure that the detailed stuff gets done. So we're here in the old War Office. Churchill, who of course is an icon of all people in politics, not just Conservatives, but the central statue outside the Ministry of Defence was Field Marshal Alan Brooke, a gunner like me, a gunner. And his job was to make sure that Churchill's big ambitions and bold plans were actually turned into granularity deliverables. And that is what all leaders of teams have to do. That is what I've always done. That's why I'm so very, very pleased of the people in this room who are supporting me, who amplify each other's work, not just mine, they amplify each other's work. They fit together like pieces in a jigsaw puzzle to form the complete picture. No person is an island, and the really good leaders make sure they have alphas around them helping them lead. That's what I've always done, and that's what I'm proud to do now, looking around the supporters I have in this room.
Harriet Line, Daily Mail. You said you'll revive the Rwanda plan, but how quickly do you think you could get people on planes if you became PM? And secondly, just following the childcare question, what would your scheme look like if it's very different to the current one?
Well, with regard to Rwanda, the first thing we need to recognise is that at the moment we are in opposition. And so daydreaming about what we would have done had we not lost this election might be a fun conversation at dinner parties, but that's not what leadership is about. Leadership is about holding the Labour Party to account. They damaged a really important international relationship. They sent a message across the whole continent of Africa that this Labour government does not take you seriously. There is no way that this Labour government would have acted with such discourtesy if that partnership had been with a European country. No way. And the emerging economies, whether they be in Africa and Asia, will have taken notice of the arrogance and disregard of this Labour Party. How long it takes to repair that damage, I can't possibly know. But I will make sure that we put a deterrent in place, because the National Crime Agency says we need one. I will make sure that we look to build that safe third country partnership, because, as I have asked over and over and over again, and as Yvette Cooper has failed to answer over and over again, what is the Labour government going to do with failed asylum seekers from countries like Afghanistan or Syria or Iran? Because if you can't send them back to those countries, you have basically given a de facto amnesty to potentially hundreds of millions of people, which is completely unsustainable. I said that that's what they would get wrong. I was shocked with how quickly they've messed up. But that's why we have got to get our act together as a party to get back into government at the first opportunity. Michael at the Express. You got Michael?
Thank you. In July, the first Border Force vessel took Channel migrants back to France for the first time. Are you frustrated that that took so long to get to that point? And linked to it, do you think President Macron was playing politics waiting for a Labour government?
Well, I can't look into President Macron's head or thinking. I would say that Michael Tomlinson and I and the team at the Home Office actually got that deal in place. So yes, of course, it's frustrating that it was first deployed under a Labour government, but that was absolutely our delivery. And the fact of the matter is that it was through the work that we did that we actually put those people smugglers in prison, as I say, hundreds of years of sentences. And I know that whether it's our returns relationship with Albania, that saw Albanian illegal migration cut by 90%, whether it's the work that we were doing with the European countries on the Channel coastline, Belgium, Holland, France, and others. I know that we were delivering. If we had had more time, I feel confident we would have delivered and got those flights off to Rwanda. The timing of the election was never in my gift, and I also recognise that there were considerations that probably I didn't have access to that were in the Prime Minister's thinking. But nevertheless, on all the metrics, as we saw the figures that came out mid-August, on every single metric against which I could be measured, we were heading in the right direction in the Home Office under my watch, and I'm very proud of that. Jack at the Sun.
Thank you, Mr. Cleverly. Jack Elson from The Sun. As you just mentioned, you're taking a lot of credit for a package of curbs, which is projected to bring net migration down from about 700,000 to about 300,000. Is that a point you are happy for it to settle at? And if not, then what further measures will you put in place if you're the Prime Minister?
So the simple answer is no, that is not a figure I'd be happy to settle at. And had we had more time, I would have continued on the measures that I'd taken to bring net migration down to more sustainable levels. As I said, the thing that I set out in my speech is how we look at the economy and how we look at migration needs to be fundamentally different. GDP per capita is the only game in town. India has a bigger absolute GDP than Switzerland, but the Swiss people are individually, of course, much better off than Indians. So we should recognise that overall GDP is important, of course it is, but GDP per capita is what people feel in their pockets, in their pay slips when they go to the shops. So that's what we have to prioritise. The precise figure, and there is no point in a leadership candidate, me or anybody else, plucking an arbitrary figure out of the air and saying, if you elect me, I will get immigration down below this figure. Because we tried that and the British people just don't believe us at the moment. So we need to set out a credible plan. I am the best placed to set out a credible plan and be believed because I am the Home Secretary who actually delivered on the promises that I made. Genevieve. Microphone here, Genevieve. Thank you.
Thanks. Genevieve Hall-Allen from The Telegraph. You've said that you will resurrect the Rwanda partnership. So will you pledge to leave the ECHR? Kemi Badenoch this morning, your rival, has said that she won't do that. She says it's an easy answer. And she said that it was the kind of pledge that got the Tories, and I quote, in this mess in the first place. What would you say to that? And will you pledge to leave the ECHR?
So the ECHR was not the body that stopped the planes taking off just before I became Home Secretary. It was the UK Supreme Court that stopped those flights taking off, which is why I signed an internationally binding treaty with Rwanda that the Labour Party ripped up. I got the Safety of Rwanda Act actually through the House of Parliament, meaning for the first time codified the British Parliament is sovereign above and beyond international jurisdictions. First time that's codified under my watch in my act that I marshalled through the House of Commons. And the simple fact is that if we are trying to grab shorthand answers, quick fixes, the British people will look at us and say, we've heard that before. We need to be honest and open. We need to show where things are difficult and how they can be achieved. And I had a plan. I had a plan, which is why those small number of voluntary asylum seekers went to Rwanda. Because the Supreme Court's argument was that Rwanda was inherently dangerous for asylum seekers, and I was building an evidence base with asylum seekers in Rwanda to prove that was not the case. That's how we would have defeated the UK Supreme Court. That's how we would have got the flights off, not by quick fixes or sound bites, by graft and delivery and focus, which is what we have to do to gain credibility getting back into government. All good.
Hello, Mr. Cleverly. Aubrey Allegretti from The Times. First of all, you've been very forceful in your speech and in your answers just now in saying that the party needs to stop messing about and get our act together and that there's no time to lose. So I'm curious, are you happy with the leadership contest ending on the 2nd of November, 2 months away, after which point the budget will have been held and denying you a chance to be able to respond if you're leader? And second of all, there was a poll out over the weekend of Conservative members. You were excluded from the runoff of prospective matchups. Do you think you're at risk of being sort of counted out of the race before it's really begun?
So no, I am not at all worried. In response to the second half of your question, I'm not at all worried about that, because in the runoff polls, look, I have no idea why that poll. I think I have an idea about why that poll excluded me. But in the runoff poll that didn't exclude me, I won against all the other candidates. So. And with regard to your first question, you play by the rules of the game. I didn't set the timetable or agenda. That was done between the party board of the 1922. I'm not the kind of person who cries because I don't necessarily like the rules of the game as it's played. I just win. Kieran from The Guardian, please.
Thank you, Kieran Stacey from The Guardian. I think you mentioned childcare before, and I didn't quite understand what your plan was. Are you saying that you would remove all government subsidies for childcare if you were Prime Minister? Second of all, you talk a lot about delivery. Do you worry that some of your fellow leadership contenders are leaning a little more into culture war issues?
So I'm not going to get drawn on criticising my friends and colleagues, because every one of the other candidates is a good friend and a good colleague. I know you're fishing for a nice sort of blue on blue headline. You're not going to get one. So just let you know that that's not going to happen. And look, with regard to the childcare issue, the broader point I'm making, and don't get too het up on the granularity. The broad point I'm making is that is a policy area where we created a problem through a surplus of regulation and interference, and then our response to the problem of government creation was not to remove the initial problem, but to create a whole load of other problems by subsidising, taxing, employing more civil servants to deal with the implications of our initial decision. So what we should do is go back to first principle and just say, right, let's make it easier for families, for friends, to look after each other's children, just as humans have done for millennia. And let's back off from interfering, over-regulating, burdensome, high-taxing government. That is the point that I'm making. Arj at the iNews.
Hi, James. Arj Singh from the iNewspaper. You've set out a lot of expensive commitments today on abolishing stamp duty.
And it's not expensive. Sorry, you're getting your maths back to front.
Can I finish the question?
Taxes are expensive. Cutting tax is the opposite of expensive.
Let me finish the question.
Okay, go
on. You've suggested you would bear down on the welfare state to help pay for some of the commitments, including on military spending today. I think Gary tried to pin you down on specifics. I was hoping I could do the same and ask you whether you thought the pensions triple lock is sustainable going into the 2030s when you might be Prime Minister, especially when we have an ageing population, and would you commit to the triple lock?
So the reason I've set out some, but not all of the plans and policies that we're putting forward is because this far out from the likely date of the next general election makes it really impossible for us to nail down how much repair work we are going to need to do after this current Labour government smashes things up. And what we've already seen, we can see where the Labour Party's direction of travel is. The very first thing they did, their priority action, was to take money off of pensioners with no justification, completely dishonest about their rationale, completely hidden this, no mention of this in their manifesto. Indeed, in May of this year, a few months before the general election, Keir Starmer stood at the dispatch box and demanded that the Conservatives make a commitment not to touch the winter fuel allowance before doing it himself. That dishonesty and hypocrisy turns off voters. You will never get that from me, which is why I'm not going to speculate on things that I might need to do. And with regard to taxation, and this is part of what's caught us in this loop. This is part of what caught us in this loop. The thing you pay for is government expenditure. You pay for that by taxing people. either through direct taxation or inflation, which is indirect taxation, or borrowing, which is deferred taxation. The British people pay for every single penny that the government spends, and I think we should be taking less money off the British people, not more. That will be my priority as leadership. Lucy. Lucy.
Hi, Lucy Fisher from the Financial Times. James Cleverly, you've talked about wanting to pare back red tape for business. Could you give one example of an area of regulation that you'd like to axe? And are there any other measures you can outline today as to how you'd go about trying to make the Conservatives the party of business? Thank you.
Well, Lucy, I've spoken at length about one classic one, which is the childcare business. And, you know, I was very conscious that when I was a kid, growing up watching the Winter of Discontent, not necessarily knowing all the details of why it was happening, but I could easily see that there was really a bad state of affairs. And comparing that with the environment that Margaret Thatcher created, where my dad started his business. So he started his business under Margaret Thatcher, and through the 80s, it grew. And because my dad's business grew, and because the British economy grew, once more a serious player on the world stage, we were able to fund the National Health Service, where my mum worked as a midwife. So I've seen the natural symbiotic relationship between a growing economy and well-funded public services. Compare that when I started my business in 2007, and I was horrified the first time I did a financial distribution for one of my members of staff, just seeing how much money that I had worked so hard to bring into the business was scattered, not going to the sales guy that I was employing, but to the government in various forms of taxation. The amount of time that I spent not chasing new business, but filling out forms and documents online to let the government know what I was up to almost every minute of the day. And then when the economic downturn happened at the end of the Labour government, my business went under. And I am struck by the difference between that pro-business environment that Margaret Thatcher created and the massively anti-business environment under Gordon Brown and Labour. And I want to go back to that Thatcherite era where entrepreneurs are rewarded, wealth creators are a key part of our society, and we get back into the habit of being on the front foot rather than the back foot. And Andrew MacDonald from Politico. Is Andrew in the room? Anyone? Anyone can do an Andrew MacDonald impression? No? Okay. David Hughes. David Hughes from PA? No? Okay. Nick from Evening Standard. There. I could see you were in the room.
Yes, at the last election, your party ended up with 0 MPs in London and also lost seats in outer London. What went wrong, and how would you win back these London votes?
Well, I've kind of touched upon this already. London tends to be demographically younger than much of the rest of the country. So if we're going to win in London, we need to make sure we do have a credible offer for younger people. I know how to win in London because I've helped someone do it twice against expectations. With Boris in 2008 when no one expected him to be elected, and a lot of London Tories were giving me strong advice not to associate myself with him because he was a vote loser. I knew that was nonsense. I could see he was a vote winner, and I supported him in 2008, and he won. And when I was told that it was a fluke and never get re-elected in 2012, I supported him in 2012, and he won. And so I know that we can win in London, and I know that we can win in other urban areas. But I know what we need to do, because I've seen it before. You need to have an offer, a positive offer, an entrepreneurial offer, an offer for young people that they can have not just jobs, but good jobs. Not just good jobs, but a chance to get on the housing ladder, a chance to support their families. This is a thoroughly conservative agenda. It is what Margaret Thatcher did when I was a kid and was rewarded by winning seats like the seat I grew up in, Lewisham East. And when I say that Lewisham East had a Conservative Member of Parliament, people are amazed. But it can be done, but we have to be relentlessly positive. We've got to have a pro-growth agenda. We have to be entrepreneurial and respect and reward entrepreneurialism in society. And if we do that and communicate those values well, we can win in central London and central Manchester, Birmingham, Leeds and other wonderful big cities around the country. And that's what I'm absolutely determined to do. Ladies and gentlemen, I am terribly sorry I have to call that quits, but thank you so very, very much for coming.